I'm Jacob Courtwright, and this is The Locker Room. What's going on, Locker Room faithful? Jacob Courtwright here with a brand new episode of The Locker Room. Hope you're having a great day today. Before we get started, as always, follow us on our social media, The Locker Room Podcast 615 on Instagram, The Locker Room Host Jacob on Facebook, The Locker Room 22 on TikTok, and on Twitter, TLR with Jacob. Also, we want to thank our very good friends at FNX Fitness. Go to fnxfit.com. That is fnxfit.com for all your supplement and health needs. They are now selling clothes. I know, it's a massive deal. So if you're big into workout gear, hop on over to FNX Fit. Use your promo code TLRHOST. That is TLRHOST, all capitals, for 15% off your order. My gift to you. Let's get into a great show. Well, as promised, I told you we were going to be talking about the past fights that happened this weekend. Mainly two fights, the Nate Robinson and Jake Paul fight, and then, of course, the Tyson versus Roy Jones Jr. fight. And then we are going to get into a UFC versus boxing comparison. It was voted by you guys today on my social media, and actually we are going to be doing the NFL's most disappointing, which the UFC versus boxing was going up against, because there were so many votes both ways. I think UFC ended up edging out right before I started the show, but at the end of the day, I'm going to do both to help please you guys, the fans, because you two really seemed like, or both sides of this really seemed like they wanted these talked about today. So that is what we are going to do. Hey, make sure that you're staying up to date on my social media as well, because the Locker Room is launching a UFC fight night and or just a fight night podcast that will happen on the eve of big fights, where we give you predictions. I've got a co-host for that lined up, and we've got a bunch more stuff coming with that. So stay up to date on our social media, mainly on our Instagram, The Locker Room Podcast 615. That is where all the future information from that for that UFC and Fighting Night show will come, and any kind of updates that you are looking for. But anyways, let's get into the first fight of the night that we're going to talk about, which is the Nate Robinson versus Jake Paul fight. Now, here's the deal. Athleticism does not win fights. Athleticism might win games, but it does not win fights. There is not a single person that you would talk to that would say Jake Paul is a better athlete than Nate Robinson. But here's the deal. Having a 43-inch vertical doesn't help you when someone's throwing hammer fist to your face. And Nate Robinson was by far the superior athlete. Nate Robinson by far is one of the most superior athletes, well-rounded, that we have seen in these past decades. But at the end of the day, he relied way too much on his athleticism and didn't have enough fighting skills. Jake Paul is trained in boxing. He trains with some of the best boxing coaches that are around, because this is something that he is taking very seriously. Jake Paul is not just playing at boxing. He did not just pick it up for a celebrity boxing match with Nate Robinson. He picked it up because apparently, from what he says and from what we have seen and from what we have seen in him in the ring, he wants to become a professional boxer, and I do believe he does have the skill to do that. Listen, he's got some heavy hands. He's got decent footwork. Now, we have not seen him against a superior opponent, and we're going to talk about this in just a moment, some of the claims he made after his Nate Robinson fight, but I do believe that Jake Paul is a pretty decent boxer, and he went up against somebody with no experience, and what happened is what should have happened. An experienced fighter, even if it's by experience by a year to nothing, will always beat an inexperienced fighter 9 times out of 10. And that's true across the board. You hear stories across the UFC of these fighters that have people come up to them in the street and try to start fights, and they just dismantle these people. You saw Ronda Rousey taking down grown men on a beachfront in Venezuela on a viral YouTube video, because people that are trained to fight know how to fight, know what works, know what weakens people, and that is one of the biggest advantages that they have. They know what's going to work. They know where to move. They know how people are going to react when a punch or a kick is thrown. And that's why I think Jake Paul had such an advantage in this fight. Now, did I want to see Nate Robinson win? Absolutely. But I knew that Jake Paul had the advantage going in. Another thing I'd like to add to this whole conversation here Nate Robinson had no reason to do this. Nate Robinson wasn't going to prove anything if he did come out there and beat Jake Paul. In my opinion, I do not believe that Nate Robinson had something to go out there and prove, and I do believe that if he would have come out and beat Jake Paul, with Jake Paul having basically no fight record up until this fight, he's now 2-0, only having one fight under his belt, and it wasn't against a professional boxer, it was against another YouTuber. I don't believe in my mind that Nate Robinson would have jumped up to the graces of being one of the greatest athletes to ever walk this earth in the LeBron James categories, the Deion Sanders categories, like that. So I don't understand why Nate took this fight. I don't know if it was simply for the fact that Jake Paul's a jackass and everybody wants to beat the crap out of him, or if he really thought that beating Jake Paul would have proven something above and beyond what people already know of him, and that is he is a great athlete, but he's not one of the greatest athletes to ever walk the earth like he said he was trying to prove. So it was a sad fall to graces. That knockout early in the second round was a sad way to see Nate Robinson go out. Now listen, he should have been stopped in the first round. The ref gave him about 16, 17 seconds to get back up. In any other fight that would have been stopped, but I do understand this is a pay-per-view. You are trying to give the fans what they want at the same time. So I appreciate the fact that the ref didn't rush to judgment and go ahead and say, all right, well, Nate Robinson is disqualified, or he's not disqualified, but technically knocked out because he didn't get up in time for the count. So he had no gain from this, in my eyes. He took a nasty fall, and he is now a meme across the entire world. I mean, people are saying do the Nate Robinson challenge where they're laying down like the Toy Story toys of Andy coming in. Like, it's a sad thing to see Nate Robinson go out this way, especially since he tweeted like, this is to represent all basketball players, blah, 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 blah. This was a fall from graces for sure, and it took a notch out of Nate Robinson's belt. And here's the deal. Might we get a Jake Paul-Nate Robinson fight too? We very well might, and I think that as you looked at this card tonight, you saw a lot of things that are probably set up for rematches for round twos, and we'll discuss that later, of course, when it comes to the Tyson theory with that. But at the end of the day, Jake Paul was wildly better than Nate Robinson. Nate Robinson, it not only embarrassed himself, but embarrassed NBA players across the league, as people like Steph Curry, Evan Turner, and all these other players are like, yo, don't speak for us because you just got knocked out by a YouTuber. I will admit, it was quite hilarious, the amount of memes that have come out. I saw one that said Jake Paul knocked Nate Robinson out and then said, be sure to like and subscribe. So you had some really great moments coming out of this. But this was a hands-down win for Jake Paul. He not only got more clout for this, but he has set himself up for more celebrity fights, and of course, if he really is trying to get into the boxing world, hopefully more bigger fights. Which brings me to the closing statement of this whole fight. Jake Paul came out and said that he could beat Dylan Danis and that he would destroy Conor McGregor, and Conor McGregor is the big name that he's throwing out there. And here's the thing. Could he beat Dylan Danis? I actually do believe so. I think he's a little bit bigger, even though he doesn't have the quickness that Dylan does. I still believe that he would whip Dylan Danis' ass. But don't ever bring Conor McGregor into this. Now, this is where Jake Paul, I believe, is. I don't know. This is why I don't know if he's serious about boxing. If you're serious about boxing, you say, hey, I want real boxing opponents. I'm not just trying to get the biggest payday. They're talking about his brother, Logan Paul, is talking about wanting to fight Floyd Mayweather, and they're trying to fight Conor McGregor. It's smart what they're doing. They're trying to collect their hundreds of millions of dollars while they're 22 and 24 or whatever the crap age they are. But at the end of the day, don't call out Conor McGregor because you do not want that fight. Conor McGregor went 10 rounds with perhaps the greatest boxer that has ever walked this earth from a lot of people's perspective in Floyd Mayweather. Somebody who has never picked up boxing until fighting Floyd Mayweather. Went 10 full rounds with the pound-for-pound greatest fighter to ever walk this earth. Conor McGregor is the only person to take a round off of Khabib in the UFC. Now, I know boxing and UFC are very different, but I don't think you understand the athlete, the fighter that Conor McGregor is. The first time ever double champ. Conor McGregor is one of the greatest fighters in the history of mixed martial arts or just fighting in general. And here's the deal. Conor McGregor would whoop his ass. Now, I understand. I think Jake is just trying to get a money grab here. But at the end of the day, don't ask for something that you know you can't handle. Conor McGregor would not only rock Jake Paul, he would hurt Jake Paul. He would knock him out severely. And I think Conor McGregor would go in trying to hurt him. Because anybody that calls out Conor McGregor understands that Conor McGregor is a different animal. Conor McGregor is about to be another belt holder in the UFC, in my opinion, very soon, if Khabib does stay retired like he says. So don't call out Conor McGregor. That's my biggest beef with Jake Paul. Other than that, great fight. Now let's move on to the main event here, Tyson versus Roy Jones Jr. Here's the deal. I was excited for this fight. I was excited more so to see Tyson come back than Roy Jones Jr. A couple takeaways right off the bat. Roy Jones Jr. was pathetically out of shape. Roy Jones Jr. was pathetic. Roy Jones Jr. Threw one or two decent punches. He spent the entire night trying to stay in the clinch with with Tyson, because he knew that if the second they broke apart, Tyson was going to hit him with some nasty body shots. So Roy Jones Jr. right off the bat was completely pathetic. It was sad to watch, and if it wasn't for the extra padding around the belt area, I think Roy Jones Jr. would have been TKO'd in probably the second or third round from some of those body punches that Tyson was giving him. Now, there is a rumor going around that Tyson said he would not aim at the face, and we saw 0 face shots against Roy Jones Jr. If Tyson said no rules, I'm going to go for face body, I don't care, I'm coming out to win this fight, I think you would have seen a Tyson knockout at the end of the second to third round. Roy Jones Jr. was that gassed after the first round. So that being said, Tyson still got it, guys. Being at 54 years of age, Mike Tyson was throwing absolute haymakers to the body. And you could see a couple of them hurt Roy Jones Jr. pretty bad. And towards the end of that fight, I think that Tyson was starting to get a little bit angry, a little bit pissed, and was wanting to just go ahead and put Roy Jones Jr. out of his misery. But Tyson looked good. He looked quick. He's definitely a lot slower than he used to be, but he looked quick. His head movement looked pretty good. His punches still pack an enormous punch. I mean, no pun intended there, but he was throwing absolute haymakers to his body. So Tyson's definitely still got it. And here's the deal. This fight was built for a rematch. And that is why it was set up. That is why there was a draw, which we are going to talk about in just a moment. But if Tyson was allowed to go to the head, if Tyson had no rules, if Roy Jones Jr. and Mike Tyson stepped into the ring to for real fight again, Tyson dominates him and probably knocks him out in the fourth round. That being said, Mike Tyson not only destroyed him in general, but he won every round except for one round, in my opinion. I think Roy Jones Jr. snuck away with the 7th round with a 10-9. Other than that, I had Mike Tyson winning every round 10-8, 10-9 easily. I don't understand how any real fighting judges, and they were all world champion judges, unless this was tailor-made to have a rematch, because they talked about it afterwards. The judges gave it a draw, which is all bullcrap. So it was tailor-made for a rematch. If this was not tailor-made for a rematch, if this was just straight up, and we had no rules, like I said, Tyson would knock him out in the 4th round. But let's say we put the rule in place. Tyson still wins this fight and wins every single round, in my opinion, except one. The 7th round, I thought Roy Jones Jr. loosened Tyson up a little bit. It looked like Tyson started to get a little bit gassed. But Tyson has been training in 3-minute rounds. The rounds were 2 minutes, so Tyson still looked great at the end of that fight. And when it hit that 8th round, I thought Tyson was going to come out there and try and knock Roy Jones Jr. out. But of course, Roy Jones Jr. went back to his baby move, which is just grab Tyson's arm, just hug him, hold him, push him up against the rope, and just pray that the round ended a lot quicker than it did. So this was tailor-made for a rematch. But Mike Tyson, I rewatched this fight twice. Mike Tyson landed more significant shots, landed more shots, caused more damage. He did everything better than Roy Jones Jr. in 7 of the 8 rounds. So this is tailor-made for a rematch simply for the fact that they put it as a draw. But hands down, Mike Tyson won this fight massively. And if they do a rematch, because this is what they're setting it up for, because, listen, Tyson needs the payday because he blew a lot of his $635 million earnings because he's Mike Tyson. And if Roy Jones Jr. stops being a little baby and comes back and does do a rematch because the money's just too big, they need to go in with no rules. They need to go in with blood in the water. And Mike Tyson needs to come out once and for all and just knock him out. Because here's the deal: you're losing me boxing on these celebrity boxing matches. It's hard for me to say that the Conor McGregor fight wasn't rigged just a little bit. I saw Conor pull away several times from Floyd Mayweather when he could have put him away. But I'm not going to get into hearsay, or I'm not going to get into speculation about that. But straight up, Mike Tyson not only won this fight, but if they do a rematch, which it's set up for a rematch, it's like those movies. You know it's set up for a sequel, because they show the bad guy's dead body start to move at the very end. Like, then I want no rules. I don't want any agreement between Tyson and Jones. I want Tyson to go out there for blood, and we're going to see that Mike Tyson is not only the superior fighter at his age, but Mike Tyson is the better fighter. In their prime, I'm picking Mike Tyson every single time. Now let's get into the fan segment here of that you guys voted on, UFC versus boxing. Now this is going to be a little bit of my opinion. This is also going to be a lot of statistical stuff as well, so you can see where the progressions and regressions are coming from, and also what people are enjoying to watch more. I think that's a big telltale sign is, what are the numbers? What are people watching the most of? Now, I know there's a lot more UFC fights than there are boxing matches that have been televised. But if you take away all of the excess fights that the UFC has when they're now having fight nights just about every week or every other week, take away all those fights, right? And just do the big pay-per-view events. The UFC is outperforming boxing almost 3 times the amount on their big pay-per-view shows. The biggest boxing one that has been in recent history was, of course, the Tyson Fury fight, the rematch, fight number 2, which lasted all of, I don't even remember, 3-4 rounds before Tyson Fury, one of the best boxers of all time, just dominated that fight. And before that, do you want to know what it was? Because I went and did all the research. Conor McGregor, Floyd Mayweather. Those are their 2 biggest fights in the last several years. The sad part is the UFC is putting on massive pay-per-view events that are doing almost the exact same amount of views or higher views every 3 months. The Khabib-Justin Gaethje fight was bigger than the Mike Tyson fight. Was almost bigger than the Fury fight. And if it wasn't for Tyson Fury having so many fans all the way around the world, it definitely would have been. And when I say it was almost, I mean it was almost as in it was like 1 or 2 million off from the Tyson Fury fight. Not it was 60 to 70 million. Like 1 or 2 million off from overcoming the Tyson Fury fight, which was one of the biggest fights in our recent history. So what does the number say straight off the bat? That the UFC is outperforming boxing. The UFC is outperforming boxing, not only viewer-wise, but money-wise on the big pay-per-view fights. The Mike Tyson fight, yeah, was it popular? Absolutely. Did you know that the last big UFC pay-per-view with Khabib did almost double the revenue? And that's my problem is these diehard boxing fans that say boxing is so much better than UFC or it has more fans than the UFC. It's just simply at this point not true. On generic UFC fights per week. Now, there's very few people that are religious to the UFC. I am a big UFC guy. Our co-host that is going to be on our UFC fight night not only is a massive UFC fan, but he did competition fighting. So we're the kind of guys that know the random fighters, and we watch the prelims that nobody else watches. Do you know how many people watched the prelims for this past fight that happened the same day as the big fight on November 28th of the Tyson versus Roy Jones fight? 1.18 million people were watching prelim fights the same night that the Tyson Roy Jones fight was already on. So the UFC is literally wrangling in 1 million people on prelim fights that are free on ESPN. And that's the consistent number. So the numbers do fluctuate, but what they do is they take the fluctuation numbers from the beginning, from the end, they add them together, and that was the fluctuation number. That is the number that they averaged out to. 1.18 million. So, off the bat right there, the UFC is outperforming boxing viewer-wise. It's outperforming boxing money-wise in a lot of the big pay-per-views, depending what they are, or they're very close in their pay-per-view numbers. The next thing that I want to talk about, the UFC is growing at almost 3 times the rate of boxing. And why is that so? It's so because they have something that nobody else has. Dana White. Dana White is the greatest promoter, the greatest fight putter together. I don't know what phrase I'm looking for there. Fight maker. And one of the best business leaders that I have ever seen when it comes to his sport and his company. He's the best sports manager. He's the best GM. He's the best coach. What Dana White has done for the UFC brand, it has blown it up from fights in a Kmart parking lot to some of the biggest fights in history. What Dana has done so brilliantly is not only has he put shows on every week, not only was he innovative during this COVID brand of fighting, not only did he continually add fighters to the roster, but he has made it a clear-cut pathway to get into the UFC. It's kind of like he made the AA, single A, and triple A of the UFC. Except it's not as complicated as that. Because I still don't understand the triple A goes down to double A or the single A goes to triple A. I don't understand all that craziness. I'm not a big baseball guy. It's boring, all right? But that's what he's done. Whether it was the Contender Series, whether it's the Ultimate